She spoke the lost warrior language. The steel relic saluted. Orders confirmed. General. Elara stepped into the excavated hangar with the weight of a civilization pressing behind her, the air thick with dust, and the metallic echo of ancient battles waiting to be remembered. Floodlights cast long pale beams over the towering relic, its armor cracked yet unbroken, its posture like a slumbering knight halfway risen from a grave of stone and centuries. Her boots clicked across the grated walkway, every step trembling through her legs, even though she forced her shoulders into the practiced confidence of a trained linguist. Command had insisted she was ready. Her heart strongly disagreed as it hammered against her ribs like a warning drum. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Above in the observation balcony, humanity watched in held breath, knowing this moment might decide the fate of tomorrow's wars. Elara rested her fingers on the rail and stared at the machine that had once guarded human cities when humanity was young and desperate and brilliant. If it woke under her voice, it would be the first time in 300 years that an ancient war machine obeyed a living human. The relic knelt on one knee, fused with rock where the excavation team had cut it free, orange mineral veining its joints like dried blood. Shattered plating exposed glimpses of the internal conduits, dormant yet humming faintly now that proximity sensors detected a human signature. Symbols were etched across its breastplate, curved, sharp, rhythmic marks that Elara had spent half her adult life deciphering from brittle manuals lost to time. The lost warrior language, her professors had called it, speaking of it in reverent hushes because it was more than speech. It was command, identity, allegiance. It was the language humanity had invented before they had numbers to label their fears, when they fought enemies too vast for conventional strategy. Now, after generations of peace and growing threat from unknown orbital shadows, humanity needed the past again. And Elara, trembling inside though she hid it, was the one chosen to call it back. So, we're green. Begin when ready. General Sato's voice whispered in her ear. Steady but laced with tension, he refused to show aloud. Elara nodded once, though no one could see her clearly from the balcony, and lifted her chin toward the machine's bowed helm. Her throat tightened, fear, awe, and something painfully human, the knowledge that she was speaking to history itself. She exhaled, shaping syllables that had lived only in dusty pages and half-corroded audio logs. Koresh Tanvo, Dorikari, Heshven, Varu Command, Elara's Son. The words vibrated oddly, ancient consonants scraping the air like metal dragged against stone. Silence followed, thick and stretching, her breath catching as the world seemed to wait with her. Then the relic moved, and everything inside her jolted as if her bones had been struck. Dust cascaded off its frame in drifting clouds as dormant servos groaned awake, the sound deep enough to shake the walkway under her boots. The visor, cracked, blackened, scarred, flared with twin lights like molten eyes rekindling from long sleep. Elara's breath hitched. She clenched the rail but did not step back, remembering the rule written in trembling handwriting by long-dead soldiers. A commander does not flinch. The relic's spine straightened in a grinding sweep, plates locking into place as if remembering a posture it had not held since the first wars. Then, impossibly, its massive right arm lifted to its chest and snapped outward in a crisp salute that sent vibrations humming up the tether, securing her harness. Orders confirmed, General. It replied in a voice like a storm echoing through metal canyons, speaking her title as if it had known her all her life. Shock rippled through the upper gallery, shouts, curses, hurried mechanical readouts, but Elara heard none of it. Her world had narrowed to the ancient titan saluting her. She could feel its focus, like standing in the gaze of an old warrior judging whether she was worthy of the authority she had unintentionally claimed. The manuals had warned that pronunciation mattered. One wrong inflection could trigger aggressive protocols, but one perfect phrase could bind allegiance. She hadn't meant to activate the general rank identifier, yet the relic had accepted it without hesitation, as if imprinting her into a command role lost to time. Her pulse roared, part terror, part awe, part something she couldn't name, something fiercely human, the realization that humanity's past still believed in them. She swallowed and steadied her voice, willing her nerves into a thin thread of courage. And she spoke again, slowly, honoring a weapon forged in an age where survival had demanded impossible bravery from ordinary people. "Dorikuri," she said softly, "hold in silent watch. No enemies present. Stand down, but remain alert under my protection." The relic's optics flickered, then dimmed to a guarded glow as the war machine's posture eased from combat readiness into a poised, attentive crouch. A low hum resonated from deep within its core, less threatening now, more steady, almost like controlled breathing. Silent watch engaged. It replied, bowing its helm a fraction in acknowledgement, the gesture eerily respectful. Elara felt the sting of tears rise unexpectedly, the moment striking through her like a memory she never lived but somehow carried. Humanity had made these titans not out of glory, but out of fear, and still they had designed them to salute, to listen, to obey their fragile creators with unwavering loyalty. And now, centuries later, one of them had chosen her. Elara blinked the sting from her eyes before anyone in the gallery could see, forcing her face back into something like professional calm as the comm channels erupted. Status streams flooded her HUD. Core temperature, power draw, stress across the mountain supports, spiking, then settling as the relic obeyed and held its crouched watch. General Sato's priority tag overrode the noise, his window opening in the corner of her vision, gray hair untidy, eyes bright in a way she had never seen before. "You did it, Son," he said, voice low, like speaking too loudly might snap whatever thread she had tied between centuries. "But understand this. One clumsy word, and that thing could blast a tunnel straight through this facility and half our future with it." His gaze flicked aside at frantic officers, then back, hardening with decision. "Stay on that platform. No one else speaks to it. Until we know more, you are its entire chain of command." The words settled onto her shoulders like armor a size too big, heavy and unfamiliar, and Elara straightened because collapsing under it simply wasn't an option. She had chosen languages to prevent wars, not to resurrect instruments of them, yet ancient syllables still tingled on her tongue like live current. Below, the war machine remained in its kneel, visor glow steady, helm bowed with a patience that felt uncomfortably like trust placed in a stranger. Technicians crept back onto the hangar floor, moving with the wary respect of divers circling a sleeping predator, hauling scanners and portable shields into place. Fear lived in their tight jaws and careful steps, but so did something stubborn and bright that refused to waste the miracle they had just watched. Humans had always been like that, she thought, walking up to impossible problems with shaking hands and working anyway until impossible blinked first. If this titan answered a human voice again, it was less because the machine was special and more because humans refused to stop talking to the dark. "Relic designation Dorikuri," an engineer reported, his voice carrying thinly through the cavernous space despite the layers of metal and glass between them. Energy output stabilizing at 30% of projected peak. Weapons dormant, targeting arrays awake, but unfocused, mobility subsystems nominal. Elara turned the jargon into a simpler truth. The Titan was dangerous, but listening, a predator sitting on command instead of lunging. She lifted her chin toward the bowed helm, feeling that faint prickle of attention settle on her again, like a searchlight sweeping and halting. Switching back to the ancestral tongue, she shaped each word as carefully as if she were laying stepping stones across a chasm. "Dorikuri, confirm this. Silent watch. No enemies present. This human stronghold under your protection, not your assault." A beat passed, then the deep metal voice rolled out, grammar precise as a drill line. "Status confirmed. Silent watch. No enemies. Human stronghold recognized and shielded, General." A murmur rippled through the balcony. Even through reinforced glass, she could feel dozens of lungs exhale as panic edged into wary maybe. Command overlays cued in her HUD. Mobility drills, weapon checks, simulated engagements against the unknown objects nibbling at their outer sensor nets. They had not dug this Titan from a mountain as a museum piece. They had done it because ships had vanished at the system's rim without wreckage, only shredded signals. Newer defense arrays could track the intrusions but not hit back fast or hard enough. The clean math said habitats would fall before they adapted. Centuries ago, facing extinction, humans had made monsters of metal and language to stand between them and the dark. Dorikari was proof that they'd succeeded once. Now, older and tired, but no less determined, they were reaching back to that ferocity and betting their children on the idea that they could use it better this time. Elara's pulse steadied around that thought, as if her heart had finally found a rhythm that matched the slow thrum of the awakened machine. General in field, Elara, Sohn. Dorikari said suddenly, unprompted, and the full honorific jolted her more than any grinding of metal. Request clarification. Elapsed time since last battle. Status of prior command. Purpose of current reactivation. Her mouth went dry. The manuals had mentioned query subroutines, but hearing this structured curiosity felt like a statue leaning down to whisper questions. Careful, Sato cut in on the private channel. The single word edged with the first real sharpness she'd heard from him today. Anything you tell it becomes part of its threat calculus. Don't dump our entire tragic history into its lap at once. Elara almost smiled despite herself, because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was carrying tragic history without letting it decide everything. She weighed her response like explosives, knowing each syllable might anchor this Titan either closer to them or a little farther away. Dorikari, she answered in the old tongue, letting respect and something rawder thread the cadence. Many generations have passed since your last battle. Your previous commanders died honored. After victory, you were buried so children could grow without living every day under the shadow of your guns. The visor light flickered, almost like a blink, and she imagined dusty logs spinning, matching her words against fragmentary records of ceasefires and sealed bunkers. Now a new threat comes from the sky, she continued, throat tight but steady. Erasing our stations, hunting our homes. We wake you not for conquest, but to protect those children. Silence stretched, but it felt less like a cliff and more like the held breath before an oath. When the relic spoke again, the resonance of its voice settled deep into her bones. Understood. Primary directive aligned. Defend human offspring. Awaiting strategic parameters, General. Heat surged behind her ribs. Not fear this time, but a fierce, aching pride that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with who had written that directive. She pictured crowded orbital schools, mountain towns clinging to cliffs, tiny faces pressed to viewports to stare at stars that might one day try to kill them. The unknown thing at the system's edge had already erased 3 unmanned outposts and 1 piloted scout. Retreat would have been the safer equation. But humans had never been good at abandoning the sky over their children's heads just because it had teeth, and that stubbornness was written in Elara's own bones. If Dorikari stood with them now, it was not as some alien artifact. Their ancestors had built it, and their descendants could choose what it meant this time. She straightened until her back ached, feeling, for the first time, almost worthy of the impossible general's rank the machine had placed on her shoulders. Then we start with trust, she said, switching fully into the ancient tongue and pitching her voice up to the towering helm. Dorikari, by my command, rise to full standing height, slowly and without weapon priming. This is training only. Do not harm this mountain or its people. Metal groaned like distant thunder as the relic shifted, pushing up from its kneel, stone dust raining in pale curtains that sparkled in the floodlights. The hangar seemed to shrink around it as 30 meters of armored history unfolded, joints testing their range in cautious, deliberate arcs honed long ago. Gasps and a soft curse echoed from the balconies. On the floor, a technician stumbled back, then laughed once in shaky relief when nothing exploded. The war machine settled into a towering stand, helm just shy of the reinforced ceiling, visor angled down toward the single human on the platform. For a heartbeat, Elara simply stared back, small and fragile, and utterly unwilling to step away. Whatever happened next, this moment would live in every history she knew how to write. Training posture assumed, Dorikari said. Awaiting further orders, General. Elara stood beneath the towering machine, her pulse steadying into something cool and sharpened, as if her body finally understood that hesitation now would echo across the entire system. Dorikari's vast shadow reached across the platform like a long-forgotten banner, and the floodlights glinted off fractured armor that had endured storms older than her family line. Technicians scrambled to reposition sensors, their movements half fear, half astonished reverence, none daring to speak loud enough to interrupt the impossible communion happening below. From the balcony, General Sato leaned forward, elbows braced hard, the wrinkles around his eyes carved deeper by hope he refused to voice. Elara lifted her chin toward the relic, finding her breath again in the ancient tongue that had somehow adopted her as commander. Dorikari, she called, letting authority settle into her spine the way the language demanded. We begin assessment drills. Slow movements. Defensive patterns only. The visor brightened in acknowledgement, and for a heartbeat, she felt the awe of sharing the air with something made from humanity's old brilliance and fear and unbroken will. The relic stepped back, the entire mountain trembling as 30 meters of armored memory shifted weight with deliberate care. Stone dust drifted down in thin, shimmering clouds, and Elara covered her nose instinctively, feeling the gritty scent of ancient earth and oxidized alloys coat her tongue. Dorikari lifted its left arm in a guard formation, plating locking with crisp metallic clicks that echoed through the chamber like a forgotten battle drum. Each motion was slow, telescoping, graceful for such mass, as if the machine remembered not just commands but the rhythm of drills long vanished from modern war. Elara watched its stance, mentally checking it against the old illustrations she had studied in half-ruined manuals locked behind museum glass. She felt an unexpected warmth, pride, recognition, the sense that she wasn't just resurrecting a relic, but a piece of human discipline that had been buried too deep. When the relic completed a perfect defensive arc, she couldn't help breathing the old confirmation phrase, form-aligned. Warrior stance true. A faint rumble vibrated through the air as Dorikari responded, acknowledged. Defensive arc calibrated. Request expanded engagement parameters, General. She hesitated, teeth pressing against her lower lip as she weighed caution against necessity, because even drills carried danger when the machine could crush shuttles with one step. Sato's voice cut quietly into her ear, low and edged with the brittle nerves of a man balancing hope against catastrophe. Give it something small, he instructed, movement patterns, obstacle reaction, anything that won't melt our hangar walls if it misunderstands. Elara nodded once, letting the advice settle as she scanned the room, then pointed toward the cluster of reinforced pylons embedded into the stone. In training mode, she commanded in the ancient tongue, navigate between the shield pylons without contact. Maintain minimal seismic output. A beat passed, the visor dimming in contemplation, and she wondered whether machines this old felt time or simply measured it. Then the Titan moved, each step a masterclass in restraint as seismic dampeners within its legs diffused shockwaves into gentle tremors beneath her boots. Technicians stared wide-eyed as the relic threaded its immense frame between the steel pillars with a precision no modern mech could mimic. Every tiny shift, the angled tilt of its torso, the micro-adjustment of a stabilizing plate, felt like choreography carved from centuries-old knowledge. One pylon hummed dangerously as the relic's arm passed a hair's width from it, proximity sensors screaming, but the Titan did not falter. Elara found herself holding her breath, palms slick against the railing, knowing a single slip could reduce the entire grid to molten scrap. Instead, Dorikari completed the path flawlessly, lowering itself into a grounded stance that radiated controlled readiness rather than dormant threat. Path clear, it intoned. Training directive completed. General, define next objective. The gallery erupted again, softer this time. Relief, disbelief, the beginning of something perilously close to hope threading through exhausted voices. Elara's ears rang with the noise, but her focus remained on the relic, the ancient warrior waiting not with impatience, but with trained vigilance. Her HUD flickered as updated assessments came in, efficiency metrics, dexterity readings, heat buildup, all astonishingly clean for a machine older than modern governments. Still, beneath the numbers lurked the unspoken truth. They needed more than drills. They needed readiness for the threat devouring stations along the outer rim. She swallowed, thinking of the missing scout ship, of her sister's voice going silent years ago on a distant survey route no one had dared to revisit. The ache sharpened her determination, setting her voice with a steadiness she rarely managed outside the privacy of study rooms and lonely late nights. "Dorikari," she said, throat tightening, "we must prepare you for return to open terrain. Rise to forward-ready stance. Evaluate structural integrity for field deployment." The relic straightened, towering so fully that the reinforced ceiling groaned, optics sweeping over its frame in a sequence she recognized as self-diagnostic. Burnished cracks glowed faintly along its plating as internal conduits pulsed, assessing centuries-long damage with the cold efficiency of an old soldier checking scars. Integrity at 73%, it reported, sufficient for limited conflict. Primary armament requires field recharging. Defensive shielding below optimal threshold. Elara winced at the last part. Shielding had been the defining advantage of these titans, a shimmering barrier that could swallow orbital bombardments. "Can you withstand kinetic fire?" she asked, switching halfway through the question into ancestral grammar before catching herself too late. Dorikari answered anyway, seamlessly, as if her stumble meant nothing. "Affirmative. Kinetic absorption remains viable. Plasma resistance reduced. Not ideal, she thought, but far better than humanity had dared hope, and certainly more than anything modern defense units could endure. If the strangers at the system's edge came with heat-based weaponry, they would need every ancient advantage humans had ever carved into steel." Sato's voice returned, softer now, almost reverent. "Soon, the Council will want deployment options within the hour. But before that, they want to know something else." Elara felt the tension coil again, a knot forming between her ribs as she braced for the inevitable question she had avoided since waking the machine. "Ask," she murmured, eyes never leaving the relic's glowing visor. "What is its loyalty anchored to?" Sato asked. "The old world? The old generals? Or to you alone?" Her breath hitched, because she knew this mattered. If Dorikari operated on ancestral chains of command, modern humans might not truly own its allegiance. If it was bound only to her, she had to carry a responsibility no linguist had ever been trained for. She stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor inside her. "Dorikari," she called in the ancient warrior tongue, "identify your living commander." The relic's visor flared with unmistakable certainty as it replied, "General Elara Sohn." Voice-bound, heart-aligned, command recognized until end of service. A chill ran through her, not fear, but something fiercely human and painfully immense. She had not inherited command. She had earned it the moment she dared speak to the dark, and it answered. Elara's breath misted faintly in the cold air of the hangar as the weight of Dorikari's declaration settled into her bones, heavier than any rank badge or commission she had ever imagined. Heart-aligned, the phrase echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, old and solemn, stitched into battle oaths that predated half the star maps humanity used today. Around her, engineers froze mid-task, their eyes shifting between the Titan and the slight linguist who now commanded something that could change the fate of entire planets. General Sato didn't speak for several seconds, an eternity in command time. his silence not disbelief, but the quiet calculation of a man realizing the future had just rewritten itself. Elara didn't feel powerful. She felt exposed, as if a spotlit stage had been built beneath her feet without warning. But beneath the fear was a fierce little spark she hadn't expected, a rising understanding that someone had to stand at the front, and for reasons she didn't fully grasp, the past had chosen her. And humanity did not turn away when chosen. Not in the old wars, not now. Dorikuri, she called, her voice steadying as she shaped the syllables like familiar tools. Prepare for external traversal simulation. The Titan lowered its massive helm, an unmistakable gesture of readiness. The visor glow sweeping over her as though reading her stance, her breath, her resolve. Technicians scrambled to open the armored blast doors at the far end of the chamber, their movements sharp with adrenaline, screens flooding with telemetry. Vents rumbled to life overhead, sucking centuries of dust into roaring filtration units as the mountain prepared to let a giant walk again. Elara felt the vibration through the soles of her boots, a tremor like a heartbeat returning to a long-forgotten limb. For a moment she imagined the ancestors who had stood where she stood, small, fragile, unarmored, yet commanding titans shaped by human desperation and brilliance. She found strength in that image. Humanity's legacy was not machines, but the courage to speak to them. A warning klaxon blared as the outer doors unsealed, the air pressure shifting with a sharp pop in her ears. Icy wind swept in from the high mountain valley outside, carrying pine resin, snow dust, and a thin bite of altitude that tasted cleaner than recycled hangar air. Dorikuri turned toward the opening, servos humming low and resonant, its silhouette framed by swirling snowflakes and pale dawn light. The valley stretched beyond, white ridges, dark forests, a sky just beginning to soften in a sunrise, vast enough to swallow even a titan without apology. Elara lifted her harness tether from the track and unhooked it with a decisive click. If she was giving orders that would echo across star systems, she would stand without a leash. Anxiety flared from the technicians at the move, but none dared intervene, not with the Relic watching her like a soldier awaiting its commander's stride. She stepped up to the threshold, cold wind whipping her hair, and said in the ancient tongue, "Dorikuri, walk forward." Training mode. Gentle footfall. No terrain damage. The Titan obeyed in a slow, thunder-muffled motion, placing one colossal foot onto rocky ground with careful precision that defied its weight. Stone did not crack. Trees did not sway. Seismic monitors blinked in astonishment as the machine traversed the valley floor like a giant afraid to wake the world. Elara followed to the hangar mouth, boots crunching in frost, her breath visible as she watched the colossal silhouette move against the backdrop of rising light. Each step was deliberate, measured, the gait of a weapon built for war, but now relearning how to exist without destroying everything beneath it. It paused near a cluster of boulders half covered in snow, scanning them with a faint whir of ancient sensors adjusting after centuries of disuse. Then, with a motion almost gentle, it navigated the rocks, twisting its torso with a grace that looked impossible for something so old. A soft exhale escaped her, equal parts relief and wonder. Despite the years, despite the damage, despite the myths, this warrior still remembered how to dance. Telemetry clean. One engineer whispered over comms, voice trembling with excitement. Movement efficiency at 80+%. Structural stress minimal. That's impossible. Another murmured before correcting himself. No. Correction. That's historical performance. These readings match first war logs exactly. Sato cut in, his voice sharp but tinged with awe. Son, keep going. We need to test response to environmental unpredictability. Elara scanned the terrain. A narrow ridge to the west, a shallow river to the north, a patch of unstable shale that might mimic orbital debris fields. Her eyes locked onto the shale slope. A natural test, risky but necessary. Dorikuri, she commanded, pointing toward it, descend the loose slope and maintain balance. No damage to terrain or self. Training only. There was a brief flicker of visor light, a processing gesture she had learned to read, and then the Titan moved, striding toward the slope with deliberate caution. The ground shifted under its massive foot, shale sliding in noisy sheets, and her pulse spiked as a tremor raced through the valley. For a second, she feared the machine would falter, that centuries of erosion and rust would betray it, topple it, shatter what humanity had just regained. But then Dorikari adjusted, one enormous step backward, one stabilizing pivot, arms shifting with counterweights calculated faster than any modern mech could match. The giant caught itself with perfect poise, shale cascading harmlessly past, its ankles like waves around a steadfast pillar. A sudden, fierce pride burned through her chest, not for herself, but for the nameless engineers and soldiers who had poured everything they had into creating this impossible warrior. The HFY moment struck her then, an aching reminder that humans had survived countless impossible nights by inventing light brighter than the darkness. Dorikari rose from the slope, unshaken, and turned back toward her, as though awaiting its next trial with unwavering patience. Training objective achieved, it declared. Balance compensated. Structural limits intact. Request next challenge, General. But before she could speak, alarms flared across her HUD, scarlet warnings strobing in the corners of her vision. Sato's voice snapped across the channel, clipped and urgent. Unidentified contact at system rim. Same signature pattern as the outpost attacks, moving fast. The wind froze in her lungs. The threat had arrived sooner than any projection had dared guess. And Dorikari, towering on the snow-dusted valley floor, turned its helm sharply toward the sky as if it, too, sensed the predator approaching. Elara felt the old war language rise unbidden in her throat, instinctive, fierce, ready. The past had awakened. The enemy had come, and humanity was no longer unarmed. The valley wind sharpened as Elara stepped out farther onto the frost-crusted ground, her breath pulling thin and fast as red alerts streamed across her HUD in relentless pulses. The unknown contact's vector burned across the system map like a streak of hostile light, threading past the debris fields where 3 stations had vanished without even a distress cry. Voices crackled through open comms, strategists demanding position locks, engineers urging immediate retreat, civilians linking emergency shelters. But all of it blurred beneath one truth. The threat was real, and it was here. Dorikari stood statue still, its colossal frame angled toward the distant horizon where clouds began to flicker with faint, unnatural pulses. The Relic's visor brightened in smooth gradients, adjusting spectral filters to frequencies Elara had never seen, the machine's long-lost combat instincts awakening with calculating precision. She swallowed hard, forcing her boots to stay planted even as instinct begged her to run back into the hardened walls of the mountain. Humans ran from danger when cornered, but they also walked toward it when others depended on them. She breathed once, grounding herself, then raised her voice in the ancient tongue that had somehow become the axis of this moment. Dorikari, she called, the syllables ringing against the mountain stone. Establish threat pursuit readiness. But do not engage until commanded. We defend our people with precision, not fear. The Titan's helm dipped, a soldier acknowledging a superior with a gravity that silence alone could not carry. Understood. It replied, its voice deep enough to vibrate the snow beneath her feet. Threat pursuit readiness established. Awaiting your final directive, General. The title struck her harder now than ever before. Heavy not because she wanted it, but because the entire fate of their system had quietly arranged itself around her shoulders. She thought of her sister's lost ship, drifting in pieces somewhere at the rim, swallowed by the same signature now burning across their sensors. The grief sharpened her resolve, turning pain into clarity, fear into purpose. If she could save someone else's sister, someone else's home, someone else's future, then she would not falter. Not now. Not while she commanded a Titan built by the stubborn hope of ancestors who had refused extinction. General Sato spoke in her private channel, the urgency in his tone softened by something like trust. So whatever this thing is, it will reach our inner orbit within minutes. Long-range batteries won't scratch it. Your Relic is the only unit with a chance to intercept. Elara inhaled through cold-stung lungs, watching faint lights flicker at the horizon like distant embers drifting through the clouds. "I understand, sir," she answered, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. Sato hesitated, then added quietly, "Whatever happens out there, know that you've given humanity something it hasn't had in a long time, belief that we can fight back." Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with a warmth that anchored her, reminding her why she had stepped onto that platform in the first place. Belief wasn't built into machines. It was carried by people willing to face the impossible. She lifted her chin, frost-laced wind rushing against her skin, and focused once more on the Titan awaiting her command. The cloud split. A spear of violet energy lanced downward, illuminating the ridge line in unnatural light. Carving a scar into snow and stone with a hiss she felt more than heard. Dorikari shifted instantly into a defensive posture, plates locking, core hum rising in harmonic resonance as centuries-old subroutines synchronized with newfound directives. Elara's heart slammed into her ribs. The enemy had arrived not as a fleet or a swarm, but as a single vessel, sleek, obsidian, angular, wrong in every line, moving like something alive. It descended soundlessly, breaking through the clouds in a slow glide that radiated cold, deliberate malice. A silence fell over the valley, unnatural and crushing, as if the world itself were bracing for the two Titans, ancient and alien, to acknowledge each other. The vessel angled, focusing a pulsing eye-like aperture onto Elara herself, scanning her with a precision that scraped at her nerves like static. She did not step back, though her knees trembled beneath her thermal suit. "General," Dorikari said, voice tightening with readiness, "the threat targets you. Permission to intercept?" The question struck deep. The machine was bound to her voice, but also to her safety, and war demanded leaders who stood closest to danger, not behind it. Elara felt her fear gather, heavy and suffocating, but beneath it burned something stronger. The understanding that she was not special because she commanded a relic. She was special because she chose to stand here. Because humans always had. She exhaled, tasting snow, tasting metal, tasting memory, and raised her voice in the ancient language, projecting it across the valley like a battle hymn. "Dorikari," she declared, "intercept the threat. Protect our people. Fight not for conquest, but for every life under these skies." The relic moved before the last syllable faded, launching forward with a ground-shaking impact that sent snow spraying in glittering arcs. The alien vessel fired, another spear of violet energy slicing toward her, but Dorikari intercepted it, shielding her with its colossal frame. The blast struck its armor with a violent flare, melting snow, scorching earth, and filling the air with a roar that rattled her teeth. But the Titan stood firm, plating glowing molten red where the beam had hit, runes blazing as if awakened by the pain of protecting its new commander. Elara's breath caught in her throat. No machine should have endured that strike. Yet Dorikari didn't collapse, didn't falter, didn't hesitate. It surged forward, massive arms reaching, ancient weapon mounts igniting in arcs of raw kinetic energy as it collided with the vessel in a clash of thunder and light. Metal screamed. Energy flared. Snow exploded outward in a blinding storm as Titan and intruder locked in combat that seemed to tear the valley open. Elara shielded her face against the shockwave, heart pounding with terror and awe as humanity's past clashed with its unknown enemy. Through the chaos, through the storm of light and sound, she heard it, Dorikari's voice, rising like a vow carved into bedrock for humanity, for the children, for the general I serve. And Elara knew, with a certainty that filled her like a sunrise breaking open the dark, that humanity had just taken its first true stand. The war had begun, but they would not face it unarmed. Not anymore.